Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek A Day, and today I'll be talking a bit about Star Trek Picard Season 3. And before we begin, spoilers all over the place, so if you've not finished the series, come back and check out this video at a later date. Last night I poured myself a glass of cheap wine and sat down to watch the finale of Star Trek Picard, and I was completely blown away. Afterwards, I knew I wanted to come on here and talk about the show, even though I don't do a whole lot of talking about things as they're coming out. Probably get more into that in the future. And I was toying with the idea of actually writing out a detailed review and going really in depth with every episode of Star Trek Picard. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she's like, just do more conversational, off the cuff, completely unprepared, that type of deal. And that's what I decided I kind of wanted to do with this, because instead of getting into all the nitty gritty, because there are literally thousands of reviews doing that all over the place, kind of wanted to just completely naturally talk about my more gut, emotional reaction and my feelings towards the season, and leave the more in-depth discussion for when I do individual episode reviews for older series and things that the immediate gut reaction is removed by 20-30 years. So Star Trek Picard, the first two seasons were, for me, deeply disappointing. Amanda wouldn't even watch them, and this was shared by everyone that I know that I spoke to personally, even some friends abroad, and even just kind of casual acquaintances I've talked to online. Everyone really seemed to share the feeling. I know there are people that loved the first two seasons, but no one that I knew liked them, and I really don't see much of the good in them. A few elements here and there. Rafaela is fantastic. Seven coming back. There were a couple of little things, but overall, very big disappointment for that character coming back. And so I almost didn't want to get into season 3 at all. And I also I don't stream a whole lot, so that was another element. And eventually, I tried to avoid spoilers, even though I wasn't sure if I was even going to watch it. But I kept seeing little things every once in a while pop up about the show during those first few episodes, just casually as I'm scrolling through Twitter or something. And I decided I wanted to give it a shot. It was whiplash. That's how I would describe my feelings going into that third season. Because I went in feeling like it's going to be season 1 and 2, and the complete opposite. I was absolutely engrossed in the entire thing. I was floored by a lot of the episodes and the performances, and it found a balance that I feel like a lot of new Star Trek has struggled with, where you want to find a way for the franchise to be modern and move into the future, but to do so without disregarding or disrespecting the past of the franchise. And you also don't want it to be so heavy on the nostalgia factor that that's all it really is, and it's just a string of references and guest appearances and, hey, do you remember this? Hey, do you remember that? And there's no real substance to it. You don't want to go either route. And I feel like it's a very difficult thing to do. So it's no surprise that element, I think, has been a struggle here or there with a lot of newer Star Trek, kind of trying to find that balance. And some things have been a little more successful in that than others. Strange New Worlds, I think, does a better job at that than Discovery did, trying to find that balance. But overall, I found season 3 of Picard to be the perfect formula, to really be the show that seems to comprehend the spirit of Star Trek on a deeper level, not just this surface network franchise level, really feeling the emotion and the pull and the style and the true underlying spirit, and presenting it in a way that, again, didn't feel like just rehashing and digging into nostalgia simply for that purpose and trying to create false emotional moments, and really, when you look back, there was no real depth or point to it. It avoided those pitfalls and also felt very fresh and new and set up a possibly great future for the franchise, I think, more than any other show. And that was the fantastic balance, is that I loved seeing the returning characters, the legacy characters, but they didn't overshadow the new characters that were introduced or returning. The new characters then weren't put in a place where it's forget these people, let the past go, they're useless, like we're the new cool and hip. It was a balance between the young and the old, and really worked. It really showed the message of how much the past matters, and you respect it and you love it, and you use its lessons and its pitfalls to grow your own legacy and be a next generation. I feel like it did that wonderfully, and one of the best examples was Captain Shaw, who was just brilliant portrayal. His speech about Wolf 359, really digging into why the character is the way he is, and his reaction to Picard was some of the best acting I've seen in many years, not just within Star Trek, just in general. Just some really great moments, and truly a character that helped define that balance, where it wasn't just blind hero worship for the returning cast of Star Trek The Next Generation. It was about loving them and their legacy, but also recognizing that that was a very long time ago and many things have changed. They have changed over the years, and there are also going to be different perspectives and people that you emulate and see as heroes. There are different perspectives to events within their lives that maybe don't shine them in the best light, or different reactions to the experience of Star Trek, and seeing the difference generationally too between seeing space and exploration and everything is so hopeful, and you have this generation then that's slightly younger that coming of age elements like Wolf 359, and then soon after that Dominion War, and there can be a different outlook on everything that we've seen, but at the same time not simply being a jaded asshole, really just being someone who's had a different experience and perspective. And as you let things unfold, you get to understand the person more and really respect and find them to be fascinating and multifaceted. And I think, that is probably the best example within this show with Captain Shaw of doing that. But it was fulfilled by many other side characters, both Geordi's daughters, one played by Mika Burton, which I thought was really cool, his real life daughter, Jack Crusher. So many of these newer elements put in were given time to flesh out, given time to explore those characters, as you also got the moments with the legacy characters that reminded you of your time with them and the growth with them, and at the same time showed how they've changed over the years. And just a brilliant balance in the writing throughout that whole thing. One big legacy character standout for me in particular was Beverly Crusher. I think Gates McFadden nailed this comeback for the character. Some of the other things that really clicked were the humor and the banter felt very naturally in the way it flowed. It didn't feel forced. The relationships of these characters and seeing the real love and family and camaraderie, but still also recognizing how the relationship has changed and how they've changed over time, was so effective and really reflected how I feel about relationships with people in my own life in that time frame, all the way back from TNG to now, and still that feeling of connection, but the connection is a little different, and just I love the way things turned out. I thought it brought back, on the side of conflicts and the villains, things that again were fantastic in their connection to the history and legacy of Star Trek with the Changelings and with the Borg, and just the style of how things played out, but at the same time felt very different. It felt like it was an evolution of those things, not just a retread and name dropping or showing off familiar things just because they're familiar. They actually made sense within the context and how things functioned. And with a lot of the smaller parts for legacy characters, I thought they also played out realistically and beautifully, a little bit with Tuvok, Commander, now Admiral Shelby. This season made me cry 3 episodes. I have always been a massive Rolaren fan, big fan of her character on TNG. I love what they did with her character over the years in the novels. And seeing her back, that was actually the number one thing that got me to say, all right, I'm going to watch this series, because I just happened to randomly see an image of her talking to Picard, and I was like, all right, I'll give in, I'll check this out, and loved every second of it. So even those characters, again, they were brought in not just as a quick little nostalgia grab, here's this person on the side. It was purposeful to the story. It made sense. They accomplished something with those characters in the moments that they were on screen. It was very meaningful. I relate it to, just recently, a friend of mine had me watch what was it even called? I don't even remember, it was so bad. But a new Power Rangers kind of reunion movie. And that was just, it was an oddball thing that, like, we were of the age where we grew up with that, and I have not seen Power Rangers since I was 6, aside from like watching younger cousins and they're watching all babysitting. It was just a weird thing where we got pizza together and just hung out and watched that randomly. And that was, I mean, obviously it's not going to be great, it's Power Rangers, but that was full of literally, we got this person who was on this show 20 years ago to kind of phone in or show up on set for a couple of hours, and they're on screen for 10 seconds just because, hey, remember that? And Picard never did that thing. Everything was purposeful. The drama built perfectly from episode to episode. Little moments like Picard, when he's sitting down to eat, being interrupted by the bunch of cadets and reminiscing and talking about stories, and it had a certain feeling to it. I felt like I was one of those cadets. If I was in that world and ran into Picard, even in real life, one of my heroes, this fictional character, and seeing that and just gushing over the experience and the nostalgia and the legacy, and how that moment then built into something very emotional when it's revealed that Jack Crusher was there, and just how that interplays, and it tied in perfectly to so many years of storytelling with the Borg. The Borg is one of my favorite things. I know some people think they're overused, and maybe Voyager overused them a little bit, but as a kid, seeing The Best of Both Worlds Part 1, that was probably the greatest impact a single episode of television has ever had on me. It really stuck with me, seeing that as a kid. And so that has always been a very important thing for me. And then seeing First Contact and the TNG elements of the Borg really are what has stuck with me so much through the years. And then the other thing would be Seven of Nine herself, of course, was always been one of my favorite characters, and I just love the depth added to that character, despite at first seeming like she was just going to be for eye candy, and instead end up being one of the best acted and one of the best written characters on Voyager, and has grown through the years. So I loved that the Borg they seemed so appropriate as the closing element, the rounding of the legacy of Star Trek The Next Generation, so much more than, Nemesis has its good and bad parts. In Generations, it never felt appropriate to me that Lursa and Bator, as much as I love their characters and enjoy the Klingon political stuff, it never felt appropriate that they were the ones that destroyed the Enterprise D, and that there were some things within the movies that I felt were just not quite what they could have been, even as much as I absolutely love them, and some of them are some of my favorite movies of all time. In comparison to the TV show, none of them had the same feeling of quality and closure that the last episode of the show had. All good things. And this is the first time, when you put those last 2 episodes in particular together, that it really feels like they were finally given a larger scale cinematic closure to those characters, and I loved the way it played out. And those are the other two episodes, aside from the shorter appearance of Rolaren, that had me crying. I genuinely wasn't even just bringing a tear to my eye. I mean, Vox, the episode 9, and I saw it coming when they were at the Fleet Museum, and he never saw the Enterprise D, and just thinking logically about having to recover the saucer section and what was going on with the very Borg-like technology of connecting all the starships. I love the way they played that out, and the transporter infection of the Borg code, and that played out beautifully and could have gone awry and seemed ridiculous, but it worked. I know they're gonna have to go back to the old ships, the disconnected ship, and have it save the day. And I just knew it had to be the Enterprise D. You had to have that for your moment, and the moment the light shone on that ship, I felt like a kid of the 1960s seeing the motion picture for the first time and that first look at the Enterprise. Like, it felt like that moment to me, and it was so powerful. And when soon as they walked on that bridge, I burst into tears. I won't lie about it. It just really hit right. And the reason why it was so impactful emotionally is that it wasn't just there simply for the sake of, like, hey, you remember this? Like, it could have been a throwaway thing. There was a build up to it, and even little moments before then, like 7 when they're at the Fleet Museum seeing Voyager, and that little moment. There's so many things leading up to that it just felt right. It felt like that is the ship where things should come full circle and their legacy, the last chapter, should be written. I like the Enterprise E, it's really cool, but for that legacy and that ship and what it's trying to tell within the story, it needed to be the Enterprise D, and it was just so perfect. And the last episode was a blast, and everything played out exactly how I would want it to play out. I mean, it was just fantastic. So I absolutely loved the way this all built into. And before I get to the last part, I'd also like to say I'd love to hear what your impressions are, and definitely questions. If there's more things you want me to talk about or in regards to Star Trek Picard, that's the other thing here, is I'm leaving it very, very open, just kind of giving my gut reaction, and I'd love to talk about it more in the future. And a question that I've been kind of mulling around in is, I'd love to know how many people would be interested in this type of topic discussion, but in the forms of a live stream, to get have more conversational, more back and forth. Because I'm kind of toying with that idea for if I'm going to do something like this, rather than a more in-depth, step-by-step, kind of detailed, more analytical review type. If I want to do it more conversational, maybe it'll be better suited, and I might enjoy having a more direct and immediate conversation. So that's something to toy with. So again, love to hear any questions you have, anything you'd like to hear me talk more about in depth with Star Trek Picard in particular for this topic, or the idea of a live stream. And the last thing is, technically, they keep saying there's been nothing greenlit, but I'm not sure how much I believe it, behind the scenes with the ending. It is set up perfectly for a new series, and the kind of new series that I want to see, because it's stemming from something that really seems to finally understand the spirit of Star Trek, and taking that and respecting the legacy, but removing it from the past and making it look forward to the future. Take us to that which is yet unexplored, and really put in those elements, and have everything after this point at this big kind of restart, this big kind of world-ending scenario, get it back to the storytelling of these smaller scale stories that really work. I mean, you look at a lot of the best episodes of Star Trek in the past, and you think of things like The Inner Light and Darmok, and you look at all these, and the Tapestry, just all these episodes, and beyond TNG, I mean, The Pale Moonlight and Far Beyond the Stars. I mean, just going to any Star Trek series, a lot of the best ones aren't necessarily the big universe-ending crisis storyline. A lot of the best are a smaller, more focused conflict or issue, or scientific endeavor. That's the stuff that's really hard of Star Trek, and I feel like the characters they have set up from the Titan, now the Enterprise G, are perfect for that. They kept Rafaela. I loved her and Worf. Like, that was one of the best examples too of a new and legacy character just working so well together and pulling off something fresh. But that was great. And 7 of 9, I love that character came back so strongly, and she is going to be perfect as a captain. You have Jack Crusher and so many other people that they've set up for a fantastic new crew and new adventures. It looks great seeing Q back at the end and acting like himself, and just everything is clicking in that final moment for a quality new adventure, and I really want to see that happen. That's where I want to see this lead to. Those are the main things that I want to see from the future of Star Trek. That's the last little thing I wanted to talk about here in relation to Star Trek Picard Season 3 because of how it ended, is what I'd really like to see outside of what we know is already coming is a show with what we've set up with formerly the Titan A, now the Enterprise G, with those characters looking into the future, a new period of time for the Federation, something totally different, with the destruction of the Borg and everything else, like leaving that behind and moving to something new and original, but still keeping the spirit alive. And that's what I'd like to see. And on top of that, something like this again, even if it's a 10-episode series and it moves on, this type of legacy experience with this behind the scenes, definitely this crew, doing something that does the legacy justice of Voyager and Deep Space Nine, and it's a longer shot, but Enterprise would be great. Just something like that for those legacies. I mean, these series, they'll never, it's impossible because of the amount of text that there is and the time frame, but I mean, none of this will ever quite live up to the 20 plus years of stories within the novels that they set up, and the decade and a half of stories post Nemesis, getting all the way through into like Typhon Pack and everything, and towards the end there's been so much done with these characters that can never really be done and left behind. But I feel like they have finally set it up for the first time to create something completely separate from that and fresh and new that still works and keeps that feeling going. And I am blown away by how great it was, because it's been so mixed on a lot of modern Star Trek. There's been some good, some bad, some just disappointing, and it feels like in some cases, depending on, it's different for every show and what's going on, but as a whole, it felt like it was struggling to really, as a franchise, to determine exactly how it was coming back and what it wanted to be. If it wanted to be embrace the past to the point where it's just rehashing things that's nostalgia, or separate yourself from the past so much that it just doesn't even feel like Star Trek anymore, or find that perfect mix, that happy medium. And that's where I feel like this is the first time I feel like I've really seen that with Season 3 of Picard, where I really truly believe that there is a possible very bright future the next few years for Star Trek. So yeah, Season 3 of Picard had a very big impact on me, and I love seeing where things are going.